Aren't you glad you live in Texas, not in Chicago? I only got one amen. I don't know what's wrong. All right. Let me back up. It is this last detail that is the most significant for advocates of this view, for they would contend that this technical meaning precludes in any view that understands Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4 as to be describing a pre-tribulational rapture. My apologies, folks. This is really getting hard. I'll suffer through if you'll be patient with me. I think I'm gaining on it. For if the technical meaning is granted, the procedure would be for the dignitary to continue with the delegation back into the city. In no case where this technical meaning applies, it is argued, did the delegation return with the dignitary back to his point of origin. Okay, following that? If it's a technical meaning, the citizens go out to greet the visiting dignitary. There's a formal set of activities that happen prior to, during, and after this meeting, all of which would preclude the possibility that what we're talking about here is a rapture of the church. They're getting good on timing that. That's great. What should we think of this supposed technical meaning of apantesis? A little background on the origin of this view will help us to evaluate it. Virtually all advocates of this view, used as if a proof text, is an article written by Erik Pedersen, Einhold des Kyros, Zeitschrift für Systematische Theologie, in 1929 and 30. Pedersen also wrote the brief article on apantesis in the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Michael R. Crosby notes that Pedersen's article drew on citations from material from ancient Greek papyri, inscriptions, and literature to describe the customs of Hellenistic formal receptions. These studies led to Pedersen's conclusion that in 1 Thessalonians 4, 15 through 17, Paul has these customs of Hellenistic formal receptions in view in describing the return of Christ. The list of books and commentaries that reference Pedersen's article more or less directly is impressively large. You missed it. And those that merely assert the technical meaning of apantesis as describing the formal welcome of a visiting dignitary is equally large. And in a footnote, I've got a number of very standard commentaries and reference works that cite this particular point. Often there is only the confident assertion, as for instance this from Anthony Hoekema, that the word translated to meet in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, apantesis, is a technical term used in the days of the New Testament to describe a public welcome given by a city to a visiting dignitary. People would ordinarily leave the city to meet the distinguished visitor and then go back into the city. It was unquote, and that was Hoekema. Likewise, Barbara Rossing asserts, quote, Paul's description of meeting the Lord in the air employs a very specific Greek word for greeting a visiting dignitary in ancient times. Apantesis, a practice by which people went outside the city to greet the dignitary and then accompanied him back or into their city, unquote. And I might just point out that it was this quotation in Barbara Rossing's book that really got me started on this study. I've had opportunity to debate with Barbara Rossing over her book on the rapture, and I've got another article on this in the Journal of Dispensational Theology. It's a very bad book in a number of different ways, but this just shows that this term is used and just tossed off by these authors as if, you know, the average reader is going to look at this and say, oh, it's a technical meaning, and it seems like so many people quote it as having this technical meaning, it's almost a given. Taking those who directly reference Pedersen's work, the argument for the technical meaning of apantesis is most often bolstered by citing instances from ancient sources such as Cicero's description of Rome's welcome of Julius Caesar in 49 AD, or Josephus' description of Vespasian's welcome as the new emperor in Rome after putting down the Jewish rebellion. Limitations of space prohibit a detailed analysis of these and other instances of the so-called technical use of apantesis to describe these events, but it can be simply observed that the events themselves seem to dictate, the formal elements and not the term apantesis by itself. In other words, we may simply ask if there are other uses of apantesis in settings other than these formal receptions that indicate a non-technical sense to them. Indeed, Crosby notes, a computer search of the literature written during the several centuries surrounding Paul's era using the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae produced 91 pages of citations or passages that employ forms of apantesis, apanteno, upantesis, upanteno, yet only a minority of these uses of these terms describes formal receptions. For example, Philo Judaeus uses these words 27 times, but not once to describe the meeting of a dignitary. Similarly, Josephus employs them 92 times, but only 10 times in descriptions of formal receptions. In the Septuagint, the noun apantesis is used frequently. Often it designates the hostile meeting of armies, although it also describes virtually any kind of meeting. By the way, I note in a footnote there that I did a study myself using the Tufts University Perseus lookup tool. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. If you really have a lot of time and you're really a scholar and you just want to do something that's extremely boring, actually, I spent an inordinate amount of time looking these things up for such a tiny little footnote. I'm rather disappointed that there wasn't more to show from all the hours that I spent reading all of these Greek texts online. But I must have read over 400 uses of the word apantesis in its various sightings. And since I don't really know if I can legally use so much material off of that particular website, I didn't put too much of that in the paper. But again, it's pretty pedantic and boring stuff. But basically it boils down to this. Yeah, I mean, it's not a technical term. I felt for Dr. House, I get the same feeling, after you put in all these hours studying all this really arcane stuff and you can't really use it for anything. It's just like, man, the people in my church really, wonder about some of my citations. What's he bringing that up for? Well, somebody's got to hear this, right? In short, word use alone does not decide the issue of whether or not people of Paul's day considered apantesis to be a technical term for the Hellenistic formal reception. Clearly, apantesis was used in the description of a formal meeting of greeting a dignitary, but often it was used in contexts where such a formal meeting was not being indicated. Simply put, the word considered apart from context, considered in and by itself, was not a terminus technicus. Context, not the term alone, determined whether the meeting carried any significance beyond a meeting between a group and an individual. Actually, if there is a more limited technical meaning, that would be it. That is, if the term apantesis has anything like a technical meaning, it seems to be used whenever a group met an individual. But even that might be questioned. Quite often, it talks about some Roman general or some military commander meeting somebody else. Of course, it was talking about two armies meeting. Again, it had no technical meaning. Attaching any further connotation to the term in and by itself, by virtue of its use in context describing formal receptions, is simply unwarranted. Indeed, there are several scholars who have questioned the full technical meaning. That is, they simply deny that considered on its own, apantesis has the specific technical connotations asserted for it by some, particularly in its use in 1 Thessalonians 4:17. Interestingly, both Witherington and Stott cite F.F. Bruce in their explanation of the meaning of apantesis in 1 Thessalonians 4:17. Bruce writes, when a dignitary paid an official visit, Perusia, to a city in Hellenistic times, the action of the leading citizens in going out to meet him and escort him on the final stage of his journey was called the apantesis. However, neither of these authors references this, also from Bruce. But there is nothing in the word apantesis or in this context in 1 Thessalonians 4 that demands that interpretation.